Hey, hello. Um, Important announcement before I say anything else. I'll announce this again at the end of the stream, I guess. But um, we are doing a game jam in the Discord server, in the stream community Discord server, and yeah, join the Discord if you care about that and you're not already in there. Um, People seem excited about it. Seems like it's going to be good. I am planning on playing as many of the games as I can that come from this game jam on stream in a couple weeks, few weeks, whatever. Um, and anything else to say? The theme of the jam is avoidance. You can join the Discord if you care about all this stuff, but the theme is avoidance, but it's a very loose theme. So maybe something like Angel Game, which hopefully you know about if you're if you've been around here. Um, but if you were not inspired to make something in that vein, you can literally make anything and come up with some justification for why that's about avoidance in some way. Yeah, I think it's about it. Should be fun. Cool to do more stuff with the people in the Discord and stuff. What else? Channel update. Since people have been asking for that every week, I might as well just put it at the beginning of the video. Um, so I have three. I said this last week, but I've basically been. I'm trying to make more like lightly edited videos, not like crazy production projects that are going to take me forever, because I want to actually get a lot of ideas out there in in a reasonable amount of time, because I have a lot to say about games. But more edited and more dense with ideas than the streams, because I'm not very good at talking live, honestly. And um, yeah, I so I've been trying to get back into making videos and make them a little bit better than what I was doing before, which was just kind of edited versions of the stream stuff. And I have three video ideas that I think are really really good and that I definitely want to make as soon as possible. One of them is pretty far along, but it's pretty big and complicated, as like just as a writing project is big and complicated. Um, the other two are in earlier stages, but are easier. Shouldn't take as long to make. Um, and all three of those are on hold now as of yesterday because I had another idea that I think is extremely important as like a kind of foundational thing about how I think about video games, and that's relevant in the discourse right now. And well, let me just I'll just say this. I won't say exactly what it is, but I was planning today on stream to react to Mark's Rain World review, which everyone's been talking about this week and has been the subject of some pretty um, weirdly aggressive discourse. And I somehow got myself involved in that despite like talking about I was just trying to comment on the general kind of idea of of how arcade people don't really care about blind playthroughs and things like that. Anyway, I wasn't trying to comment on this video that I haven't even seen yet, but people got real mad. Anyway, I was gonna react to that video on stream today, and as I was kind of you know revisiting Rain World and thinking about it just a little bit to like prepare, and then like writing some notes to kind of, about like things I might talk about related to Rain World on stream, I kind of stumbled into a really nice way to put a particular thing that has to do with like exploration, things that I've talked about before, like exploration. If you watched my Resident Evil 9 video recently, um, which was also a response to Mark from the Electric Underground, but yeah, kind of hitting on those same ideas that I was hitting on there, which that by the way was honestly just like a reframing of some of the stuff that I talked about in my exploration for dummies post on Substack like last year. But so if you want if you want if you want some thoughts from me on exploration-y stuff, you can find that those two places. But yeah, I have like a very different framing on kind of part of the exploration issue, because part of what people seem to struggle with when I talk about exploration is that it's a lot of different things kind of lumped together, which it is. It is that. Like exploration gameplay, what people call exploration gameplay is definitely just that. Like that's kind of unavoidable. But yeah, I found a way to kind of I feel like I found a good framing to like isolate one really important part of that. And yeah, I want to make that into a video and make that before I react to Mark's Rain World review, because I realized that if I was going to be talking about Mark's Rain World review, it would become mostly about that. And yeah, I want to make the video first. So anyway, so that's the channel update, I guess. And but yeah, this today I thought we would talk about this. So this is, I mean, I got this video recommended to me, right? Which makes sense because it's his most popular video, I assume. Yeah, most popular video by far. He's got all this stuff about games going back, but it seems to be kind of closing in on what I would consider game criticism, which is interesting to me. And yeah, like the topics he seems to be picking and the things he seems to be talking about are kind of closing in on game criticism, and especially this one, which I kind of half listened to, and I'll react to in just a minute. But then just based on the title, this one also seems we got, what is that called? Friday Night Funkin'. Yeah, like I said, Zoomer Zoomer game criticism right here. But yeah, it's interesting to see someone who is disconnected from all of the like circles that I am in, where people talk about games in a kind of deep way and really try to understand games. Someone who is seemingly just playing a lot of like, you know, mainstream competitive games and like Zoomer slop. Sorry, but like, you know, someone like that has a very different perspective on these things, and I think it'll be interesting to talk through these videos. And again, I didn't really watch this one, but I assume I assume it'll be interesting as well. Yeah, I see Geometry Dash on screen. I'm ready to get angry. We have to, you have to understand the perspective. Okay, we're not going to judge these videos as like, you know, the way that we would judge a Matthew Matosis video or a, you know, whatever. Like different people have different perspectives, and like he's trying to figure it out from his perspective, based on what he's played. But I thought that this video, from what I heard when I was half listening to it, I actually kind of liked this, and it's related to some stuff that I have been thinking about for a long time. So yeah,
You know what's kind of weird?
let's react to this. Let's fix the volume. Mechanically difficult with Geometry Dash in the thumbnail and the first few seconds being rhythm games. Didn't I talk about something like this in my Game of the Year post? Yeah. I mean, I that's definitely related. That's definitely related. I'm glad you like that analogy. I also was really happy with that segment from that post and the post overall. I feel like I was going to say something else. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, Geometry Dash and rhythm games, yeah, they are mechanically difficult in some sense. I mean, mechanically difficult is not how I would put it, because it kind of the word mechanic in a games related context, people think about game mechanics, which it's definitely not really. It's not really that. But yeah, mechanical in terms of like physical movement, challenge of getting your hands to do what you want them to do. Okay, is this good volume?
You know what's kind of weird? When someone asks what kind of games do you like, most people struggle to answer. You say tactical shooters, and they respond,
Is that too quiet? Still? Why? guess I can turn this up. It's a pretty quiet video, I guess. I can turn it up right here. Nope. Maybe like that.
Oh, so you must like Counter-Strike, Valorant, and Rainbow Six Siege. And you say,
We'll start over.
you know what's kind of weird? When someone asks what kind of games do you like, most people struggle to answer. You say tactical shooters, and they respond, oh, so you must like Counter-Strike, Valorant, and Rainbow Six Siege. And you say, actually only Counter-Strike. You say strategy games and someone recommends you Civilization, when you wanted something more like Hearthstone. Game genres are kind of broken. But I think there's a better way to think about this. And it's a much simpler way to look at games.
Okay, first of all, this is something that has bothered me for a really long time, how bad game genres are. Because they're just so they're just so rarely about what the gameplay is like at all. I mean, like we don't think of racing games and rhythm games as being like closely related at all, right? But they're pretty closely related. Like it's precise, it's you're doing precise inputs, and it's very largely about that. Like you learn the course just like you learn the song in a rhythm game over time, but before that point there's like a little bit of, sight reading of some kind. And then it's mostly about, there's variation on this, obviously. Like in F-Zero, there's also like your opponents are trying to push you off and things like that. But in general, those two genres are a lot closer together than we think they are. And then like real-time strategy is like a good genre name, in my opinion, for a genre that is not that. Like if you just think about what real-time strategy means, it's basically like it's basically like the intersection of action and strategy, right? Which you could think of as separate umbrellas. And then but real-time strategy, the way that people actually use it is like a super specific thing about like how the camera is positioned and what type of control scheme you have, and like the fact that you're controlling a big army and stuff like that. None of that should be necessary for something to be real-time strategy. Like, NERTS is real-time strategy. Like Spy Party is real-time strategy. It's like you're doing strategic stuff in real time. So yeah, I don't know. And then people don't think of something like, people think of Tetris as a puzzle game. Like it's just obviously a huge mess, and hopefully we all agree on that. But it is a very hard. Also, I'll go ahead and say, this thing that I'm trying to get at, which is like, or that he's trying to get at maybe as well, is like, what does it feel like to actually play the gameplay? And I think a better way of putting that, and maybe he'll actually put it this way in the video, I can't remember, but like a different way of putting that is just what types of difficulty are in the game. Because difficulty, if you really think about it, difficulty is the game. I think some people are much more pilled on this topic than others, but like, okay, I'll just say there are exceptions. You can play a game because it's cozy and whatever. You can play a game just to hang out with your friends. But in general, if there's no difficulty for you in a game, you can't improve at the game at all. You're just going to make the perfect decision and do the perfect thing every time you play it. There's kind of no game there, right? Like the game kind of ends at that point when the game is the process of getting better at the game. And so yeah, the types, the reasons why a game is difficult, the ways that a game is preventing you from already being perfect at it and challenging you to get better at specific things, that kind of, that is at least one of the main things, if not the main thing that should determine how we categorize a game. Hopefully that makes sense. So this is like kind of a genres topic. It's also like a types of difficulty topic. But yeah, the genres topic in terms of like what the gameplay, like how do we define pure gameplay genres, which I think is really interesting, and we need to work out better ways of talking about these things. And it just helps you understand games better when you dig into this stuff.
And once you see it, you'll see games much more differently. But let's start somewhere everyone can agree. Every game has something that separates the good players from the bad ones. Sometimes it's pure skill, your reflexes, your aim, your timing. Sometimes it's information, knowing things the other person doesn't. Sometimes it's something harder to name, the mental side, reading people, managing randomness, and adapting on the fly. These aren't
I will say he mentioned knowledge. I don't think that's part of one of his like ultimate categorizations, but I don't consider knowledge. Should I just go ahead and write out my like tentative genre classification scheme, and then we'll see how closely his matches up with mine? Yeah. No. Let's let him have his moment, and then I'll show mine.
just different skills, they are fundamentally different kinds of gameplay, and most games mix them together in different amounts. So let me give you 3 words: micro, meso, macro. Now here's where it gets interesting, and a little uncomfortable. What if I told you the clearest way to understand what a game is actually testing is to think about how you'd cheat in it? If you wanted to completely break a game to make it trivially easy, what cheat would you use?
This is a really clever framing, by the way. I haven't really heard this type of argument or framing before.
The answer to that question tells you more about a game than any genre label ever could. So let's put this to the test. What is micro? Micro is the execution layer. It's your aim, your timing, your movement, your muscle memory. An example of a micro cheat looks like an aimbot. Perfect inputs every single time. If a game can be broken by perfect execution, that's a micro game. Osu, Geometry Dash, Aim Trainers, and Tetris are a few examples. You can cheat.
Tetris is an action game, by the way, not a puzzle game. Just throwing that in there. So, like that. That's not an argument with what he just said. That's what he just said is evidence for that fact that we get into all the time in games discourse.
In Osu with perfect cursor tracking. You can cheat in Geometry Dash with perfect jumps. These are execution cheats, and you can feel the microness when you play them. Meso is the probability layer, the place where mind games exist. You're reacting to the unpredictable nature of people, not mechanics. A meso cheat looks like stream sniping, knowing someone's habits before they show them, reading cooldowns, seeing things you shouldn't see yet. The best example for the purest meso game is rock, paper, scissors. There's zero execution skill. It's entirely mental and probability. Among Us also runs on meso. So does Liar's Bar. Even the stock market is built around this layer. If you wanted to cheat in Among Us, you'd stream snipe to know who the imposter is. If you wanted to cheat in stocks, you'd insider trade. Notice how none of these cheats involve executing anything better. They involve knowing something you should.
Yo, Spy Party mentioned. That's kind of crazy. Maybe this guy's a little bit more in the know than I think he is. Maybe he's doing an elite YouTuber move of like, pretending. It's not pretending exactly. It's just like doing a really good job of using examples that people are really, really familiar with, that a lot of people are familiar with, rather than using the examples that actually make these things the most clear, or that go deepest on some of these ideas.
Macro is the systems layer. It's your routing, your resource management, and your win condition. You can think of it like the mathematically correct way of winning the game. A macro cheat looks like a chess engine, economy automation, or you can imagine like a perfect coach telling you exactly what to do.
Darren, ping it. We need to let our team know what's up.
Pure macro games are almost mathematical puzzles. Think Factorio, Polybridge, Connect 4, tic-tac-toe. Once you find the optimal solution, the game is solved. But here's where it gets really interesting. Most games aren't just one of these, they're combinations of them, and the combination tells you everything about what kind of game it is.
Okay. So these are, I don't think he gets into any more like major categories in the video. So I will go ahead and show. I'm gonna try to show how I frame these things, because I have a very similar theory or way of thinking about like the different categories of difficulty and different categories of gameplay. So the way that I think about his micro, it's interesting because he frames each one kind of pretty differently, but each one does correspond to one of my major categories. So his micro corresponds to what I would think of as like action, but the more, so there's like 4 branches of my classification scheme. The first one is basically action, but I think the best way to put it is, writing with the mouse is so hard. Sensory motor. It's like it's precision, pressing a button at the right time. It's like high APM, like just physical challenges like that, high APM, or like but it's also like splitting your attention between multiple things. It's like it's like processing the information, things like that. But then his macro is what I call analytical, which I got into this in the Exploration for Dummies post, but it's what people call thinky as well, more or less. And so this includes like, deductive, inductive, and abductive reasoning. It includes like planning and like modeling and planning is how I think about it. Like ability to model a system or a problem in your head effectively, and then like planning, like ability to generate a plan to carry out. Not sure if there's other stuff in there that I'm not really thinking about. Like just ability to remember things maybe is probably relevant here, like memory type of stuff. And then his meso, which is like reading the opponent, knowing what they're going to do and things like that. That is part of a broader category that I call social. So that would be it would be like mind reading. Both the multiplayer kind of mind reading and like you're playing a single player JRPG. You're playing a JRPG where there's like invisible teleports throughout the dungeon that send you back to the entrance, and you have to like, you have to like trial and error it to like find the path that avoids all the invisible teleport. People who've played JRPGs know what I'm talking about. There's things like this in JRPG dungeons often, and in that there is, although it is largely trial and error, there's also an element of guessing, right? Guessing what the designer is going to try to do. It becomes a sort of single player rock paper scissors game, or like it's not single player, it's multiplayer, you versus the designer, and the designer is trying to trick you by putting the next invisible teleport in a place that you wouldn't predict. That's something I would also categorize as like mind reading type of difficulty, which would go under social. But then also like communication, coordinating a team for a team game. What else? Like I guess deception, that kind of goes along with what he's saying as meso. But yeah, that kind of stuff. Understanding other people and using that to manipulate them for good or for ill. So yeah, that's how I categorize, and I think this framing is better, but I think it's really interesting that he landed on kind of the same 3 bubbles. I do have a 4th one, which I'll get back to, but yeah, let's continue the video.
So let's look at micro plus macro. These tend to be single-player precision games. You need to know the optimal solution and execute it fast. Think Rubik's Cube speedrunning, Mario 64, Jump King, and getting over it. If you were to have a perfect micro cheat in Elden Ring, you'd have perfect dodges. But if you were to have a perfect macro cheat, you'd use the mathematically optimal build. But there's one weird multiplayer outlier here. 8-ball pool. There's a mathematical
I find it interesting that's a little bit odd about how he's framing it, because like knowing the optimal build, like that's not really a cheat, right? I mean, it's a cheat for playing the game blind, but he seems to be mostly talking about competitive games here, where it's not really considered cheating to read strategies online and stuff, you know. But I guess maybe the best strategy that anyone has come up with online is not necessarily the perfect strategy. Maybe that's relevant to what he's saying. I don't know. Yeah.
optimal shot, and then there's the skill of actually hitting it. So even though it is player versus player, the room for mind games doesn't really exist. And I think it's a rare exception. Next, let's look at micro plus meso. This is PvP skill expression games. These tend to be your fighting games: Street Fighter, Tekken, Smash Bros, Brawlhalla.
Okay, I'm objecting here because I feel like there's still just as much macro, right? If we think of macro, like a large part of what he was saying was macro for like getting over it or something, is like understanding how the stuff works, which it falls under what I think of as modeling. And then, yeah, largely under what I was thinking of as modeling, which I put under analytical, which is his macro. So yeah, saying that fighting games are micro plus meso, I'm not so sure about that. I feel like there's still a lot of complex modeling of, I guess maybe not so much. Maybe there's not so much like, I don't know. I'm not fighting games, as you know, if you've been around here for a while, are one of the genres I'm least familiar with, unfortunately, and I'm trying to remedy that soon. But yeah, maybe there is significantly less macro in fighting games, but it always seems to me like understanding what's going on better, and especially when you're learning. If we're considering when like the initial learning phase, I think all kinds of analytical skills are relevant all the time, you know. Like abductive reasoning is inductive and abductive reasoning are super relevant to learning any game. But what is framing on games not great, but thought process is interesting? I think it's actually fine. I think it's not like as worked out as mine is, but I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I've played a lot more different kinds of games, and I've been thinking about games in general for a lot longer than he has probably. So yeah, I think it's pretty good. Let me just put it this way. Usually when you see a video get 1.5 million views on a topic that you know a lot about, I'll just talk about my own experience. Usually when I see a video get 1.5 million views on a topic that I know a lot about, I have a lot more objections than this. I feel like this more or less is giving people interesting stuff to think about video games, about games in general, but about video games that they probably haven't thought of before, and it's mostly moving people in the right direction in terms of how they think about these topics. And so I really appreciate this video.
Skill matters, and reading your opponents matters. But also you have some other examples like Mario Kart, like the micro of driving, and the meso of random items and unpredictable opponents. We even see some unique games like Tetris 99. The original Tetris is pure micro, but Tetris 99 also involves meso, because now you're managing who to send the garbage to. You also have physics-based PvP, like Fall Guys and Gang Beasts.
Tetris 99 is meso because you're managing who to send pieces to? I thought he was with me on the fact that, on the idea that category, what he calls meso and what I call social, is about like not just related to other people in any way, but like related to actually understanding what's going on in their heads or something like that. And I don't feel like Tetris 99 has that at all. I feel like you just look at, you're not modeling the perspective, or you're not modeling what's going on in the head of in the mind of a player who you're competing against in Tetris 99, really. Are you? I feel like you're just looking at the things on the side. You're not even looking at specific players that often. I guess in the late game sometimes, but usually you're just like using one of the 4 settings for like how to choose how to send your pieces. I'm not sure I agree with that, but it's also been a while since I played Tetris 99. Oh yeah, risk related stuff. Yeah, of course, that's definitely like an analytical type of thing that I would put under his macro. Yeah. I think often Mezzo does interact with macro in a way that's a little bit hard to untangle. Like you're trying to understand what someone's doing, which is about like knowing them, predicting what's going on in their head. But in order to understand that, you often have to have a pretty good model of how the game works, you know. So
which also fits into Micro plus Mezzo. The next one is Mezzo plus Macro. These are the mind and math games. Think Hearthstone, TFT, Pokemon VGC, and Battleship. Now, chess is theoretically a pure macro game, but at the human level, there's a massive meso component. You're optimizing for your specific opponent's habits. That's why studying opponent matters in high-level chess. And then there are some weird outliers. Balatro is a single-player game, but it's also meso-macro because the RNG of the card combines with the math of maximizing your hand.
no, I don't like that. Okay, he's putting okay. He's putting quote unquote reading the RNG into meso. Whereas I would put it firmly into macro. It's like understanding how the system works. Understanding probabilistic things about the system rather than just like one specific isolated thing at a time. It still feels like it should be, you know, the gameplay feels like it should be under the same umbrella as anything analytical, macro, whatever. See that that the framing is not great. I still think it's fine. These are relatively small details that I'm griping with compared to how much of a positive influence I think the video probably is. But yeah, to me, making the right decision with RNG in mind. Maybe people think this because it's like related to poker in people's minds. People think card RNG, and then they think about poker, which is highly meso. You know, it's all reading your opponents. But poker is also macro in the sense that, you know, understanding probabilistically what's going on, modeling how the deck works and how the deals work and how that influences your odds and everything. That's super macro. Yeah, and same here with Balatro. That's super macro. It's just Balatro is a pure macro game, I would say, in his, if I were trying to work within his scheme.
You're not executing anything difficult, but you have to pick and choose your cards wisely, and play to their biggest strength. Phasmophobia is also a weird game that fits into Meso-Macro. It's a co-op game, but it fits here because you're deducing a ghost using evidence, which is macro, while the ghost behavior has RNG, meso. Although I suspect non-PvP Meso-Macro games slowly converge towards pure macro over time. Once players fully map the RNG, it stops feeling uncertain and becomes a speedrun problem.
Whoa. Once players fully map the RNG. Okay, this is interesting. This is really interesting. He's saying that when you don't understand the RNG, it's meso, but when you do, it's macro, I guess, is what he's saying. but if you, and it does feel different. It does feel different, right? You're not able to think about it super coherently when you're not able to think about all the possibilities at once when you're still learning the game, and you don't know what the probabilities are exactly and everything, and you slowly close in on a point where it's all like something that you can deductively reason about, whereas earlier than that you kind of things are more uncertain. But if you want to think about that as mezzo, that part of the game, that early part of exploring a RNG heavy game where you kind of just have to do some guesswork and make best guesses about what's going on and about what the odds of different things might be and stuff like that, then I think you have to categorize the early stage of almost every game that way. Like when you're learning, when you see anything for the first time in any game, there's a different type of thinking going on that would fall under what he just said about the RNG thing. Like, you have to make a best guess about how this works, and you have to observe what is going on and interpret that in the way that makes the most sense. And yeah, it's a very different thought process from knowing everything and working, kind of being able to just solve everything from a top-down perspective. Hopefully that makes sense. I feel like that's a bit hard to put into words, but yeah.
And then there's the middle, all three overlapping. This is where the biggest competitive games live. League of Legends, Dota 2, CS2, Valorant, Overwatch, Marvel Rivals, Rocket League, Apex, Rainbow Six, World of Warcraft. But here's the thing, they're not all the same balance. And the cheat test tells you how exactly they differ. So let's use Counter-Strike as an example. Can aimbot win a game of CS completely alone? Almost certainly yes. If you never miss, most duels are over before they start. That makes micro extremely high in CS2. But what about X-ray, seeing through walls? Pros have done experiments with 1 player with X-ray versus 5 without X-ray. The 5 still usually win, but the X-ray player takes rounds they have no business taking.
I think this is where his cheat thing, as much as I like the framing of like the way that you would cheat tells you what kind of game it is or what kind of difficulty it has or whatever, however you want to say it. I think this is where it kind of falls apart, because there's a reasonable human limit to these things. Like realistically, a human is never going to approach aimbot level aim, and they're never going to have anything like X-ray. That's just not comparable to anything a human can achieve at all, right? So it would be better if you could somehow just highlight have someone who is have the skills of someone who's incredibly good, best in the world at aiming, but not unrealistic at aiming, and attach those skills to someone who's like average at the game in general, or something like that, because I do think this is overselling the micro aspect of CS and underselling the macro, because I feel like in high level CS, I could be wrong about this, but I feel like in high level CS, there's easier gains to be made, among the top. If we pick the top handful of players in the world, it would be easier for one of those to improve and stand out from the pack, from the rest of that group, by improving their macro than by improving their micro. I feel like. I think like Overwatch would be different. Overwatch, my micro might make more of a difference, but like, yeah, I'm not sure if I have a great argument for this other than just my intuition, which is obviously not a great argument at all. But yeah, like I feel like aim caps out. It doesn't cap out. There are diminishing returns on aim once you get around the top 1% of like CS players. Yeah, you think it really depends on how long you've played the game and how much you know about it? Well, I'm talking about like top level, just as an example, but I kind of feel like this is true at all levels. Obviously at a very low level, if you've never played If you've never played a first person shooter before, and your aim sensitivity is like through the roof, and you just are missing everything, like that's gonna be different. But like, I feel like for the top, let's just say even like top 0.1% of players in CS, they're probably at a point where they've hit pretty serious diminishing. They've hit more diminishing returns in micro than in macro. I think in macro and meso, um, getting better at predicting where your opponents are going to be is so huge in CS. And I think pro players, most competitive games that I've played that have a big meso, quote unquote, meso layer, there are standout players who are exceptionally good at meso. They have crazy reads. Like, there are certain players in Dota 2 that there's certain players in Dota 2 that you'll see clips of them over and over again. It like becomes a meme that this one guy is able to like aim the invoker, whatever the invoker ability is, that you can aim it anywhere on the map, and it's like a tiny area, and he'll like hit people with that from a mile away with like very few like tells, like very few like strong tells about where anyone might be, or like, predicting insane jukes that no one else would have predicted, like. And maybe that's okay. To play devil's advocate on what I just said, maybe that's just that guy does more wacky predictions more often, and so he's actually wrong more often, in addition to being like right on really crazy things more often. Like the GeoGuessr pros who like guess, it's like when you guess that some random ass island that like no one would ever think it would be, way too often. You're going to be wrong on that island a lot, even though you're also going to be right in a seemingly impressive way very often. But I still, my impression is still that there's a very high ceiling on meso that that gamers struggle to reach, and there's fewer diminishing returns at the very, the guess snipes. I feel like that is true, and or at least more or less true, and his kind of cheat framing doesn't really, kind of gives a misleading idea of that.
This makes Meso very high in CS2 too, which means macro, the strategic layer, is relatively the lowest. CS isn't about long-term economy optimization the way MOBAs are. The rounds are short and the execution is everything. But let's try this test with Overwatch.
I guess macro is a lot smaller. I was mostly thinking meso when I was actually saying macro about CS at the beginning, when I first started talking about CS just now. But there is still macro. Like I was saying about fighting games, there is definitely still macro, just not as much emphasis as some other games.
And right away we see a unique case, because the answer actually depends on your role. But since it varies so heavily by character and roles, I decided to ask someone who knows about Overwatch way better than I do. So if you compare all three like maxed out versions of the perfect version of it, like a cheat version of it, which one would have like the highest win rate, and how would the distribution be?
I would just say support is more macro heavy, DPS is more micro heavy, and then tank is more meso heavy.
Oh, okay.
Also, the way that it works is you have offense, defense, and control.
Yep.
Control refers to like map control. Offense refers to offensive options. Defense refers to defensive options. And if you a character's mixture or like kind of design links to this concept of offense, defense, and control. Tanks tend to depend on more control. Supports more defense. DPS more offense. And if you actually like dissect each individual hero, they will have different like varying levels. Or
I don't have much to say about Overwatch because I haven't played it very much, but I do think it's very interesting. If we're thinking about this video as game criticism, which I feel like it is, whether he thinks about it that way or not, he probably doesn't. It's interesting to just bring in a pro coach to like provide evidence or provide an example somehow or something like that. That's just something that I would never think to do, as a as a game critic. But yeah, it's interesting.
Varying focuses on offense, defense, or control.
So I'm thinking about it like this, right? If you were to give each role one cheat, you would give aimbot to DPS, and
Yes.
for
Yeah.
tank, you would give the ability to see enemy cooldowns as a perfect cheat, right? And
Yeah.
for supports, you would have
Okay. just again, this is kind of what I already said about like Balatro, but like to me, keeping track of enemy cooldowns maybe I need to reconsider this a little bit, but I don't feel like this should go into the same category as reading your opponent's mind. Like reading like obviously you're not literally reading their mind. What I'm saying that what I mean is like making predictions about human behavior. It's like something about understanding how humans think, reading the patterns behind other humans thinking. Although now that I think about it, there is also a heavy inductive slash abductive reasoning layer to that. hmm. But anyway, yeah, maybe I need to reconsider that a little bit. But yeah, I was thinking that this is something that doesn't really, understanding the cooldowns is something that you could just track based on paying attention and just on paying attention to what you actually see them do, and then remembering, right? Like keeping that in your head and tracking that in your head in the same way that like Quake players track the spawns, the pickup spawns and stuff. So does that really belong in the same category as like anything social? I'm not convinced. But I thinking about this more, I am trying to justify my take. I am seeing a little bit more why he defines Mezzo a little bit more broadly than I would expect in terms of like reaching into RNG games and things like that. But yeah, to me that's like an attention management thing to notice all of the times that your opponents used certain abilities so that you can then track the cooldowns. And then it's like a memory thing, or like I guess more attention management to kind of keep it in the back of your mind so that you have a vague idea of like how long it's been since those things that you noticed. Yeah, feels pretty distinct from like reading your opponent, like making good, doing footsies in a fighting game, fighting game neutral, making good predictions, stuff like that. Feels super different.
a coach or an engine, perfect coach.
Yes, that's perfect. That's exactly perfect. And also, especially in Overwatch, because it's 5v5, because you only have one tank. Like, if you can win every duel as a tank, that's kind of like a free win for your team.
But what about Apex? Apex sits remarkably balanced across all three. If you think about which player is most likely to win, a guy with perfect aimbot, a guy with perfect wall hacks, or a guy with perfect ring knowledge, all three actually has a pretty good chance of winning the game.
Again, because the aimbot is a lot better at aiming than a human would ever be, I think this is not quite true. I do agree that it's pretty balanced in terms of the three categories, but like the aimbot is just too much stronger than a human could ever be. And like eventually at the end of the game, it's going to come down to aim. Probably. I feel like it's the aimbot. Yeah, I feel like it's the aimbot. And then like, sorry, what did you just say?
Or a guy with perfect ring knowledge.
Perfect ring knowledge? I mean, you're gonna get, yeah, like you're gonna get to a good, you can get to a good spot, but like you can get to a good spot with like no shields because you haven't dealt any damage to anyone, and then you can just camp that spot, and then like you die to the guy with the aimbot who shows up because he just cleared the whole map and he has aimbot. Yeah, and like wall hack wall hack cooldown info, like this stuff versus aimbot is silly also because like, you can know that someone's coming from behind this wall. I guess it depends on the type of aimbot, but aren't there like types of aimbot that just instantly snap to someone who's like, I guess maybe they have to be on your screen or something like that. So maybe if you sneak up behind the aimbot, then you kill them. I feel like aimbots are so much better than most humans that like you're probably losing to the aimbot even if you sneak up behind them if they just have reasonable reaction time to turn around and let the aimbot win. So yeah, but I do agree with this general point that Apex is balanced in terms of the three categories.
All three actually has a pretty good chance of winning the game. If you have aimbot, you can easily kill anyone rotating, but any close range fight will tend to go either way. But with perfect wall hacks, you can use your nades and abilities to take a team down, but you'll still lose to someone with good ring positioning. But even with perfect ring information, you could still easily die to someone who wants to contest that position. But let's test this in a really unique game. Rocket League. I asked Pro Rocket League coach Luke on his answer to this thought experiment, and this was his response. Basically, perfect micro or perfect mechanics in Rocket League would be defined as taking the ball from point A to point B as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Like how in a first-person shooter, aimbot moves the crosshair to the target as quickly and as efficiently as possible. For Rocket League, smarts cannot make up for the fact that a more mechanical person can just take the ball to the open net far more than someone with less mechanics. This makes Rocket League heavily micro dominant. But after micro being the most dominant, he put macro second and meso last. This is because even if perfect meso allows you to hear enemy comms or see enemy boost, doesn't change the fact that all information in Rocket League is able to be known at all times. And for how fast-paced the game is at the highest level, listening to a perfect coach verbatim would be better over hearing enemy comms or seeing enemy boost. Also,
That's pretty interesting. I wonder why why there's not much reading in Rocket League. I haven't played Rocket League like at all basically, so I really don't know much about it, but like, is it just because everyone's just always going for the ball in Rocket League? Like everyone just wants to go for the ball. And I guess not just that, but like I don't know if it's like soccer in terms of like positions and like wanting to kind of spread your team out throughout the map. But if it is, then that's also something you can just see and react to. It's not something that like is part of your opponent's plan that you could benefit from like reading their mind. Car gamers.
the closest thing to perfect micro in Rocket League is the AI bots. I came across footage of 3 semi-pro players versing 3 of the best Rocket League AI.
Crap, and you're dusting, bro. Oh my god.
And the 3 AI bots were able to win comfortably. So here's what this framework actually gives you. It helps classify games, but it also helps understand yourself as a player. I noticed something when I looked at which games I genuinely enjoy. I gravitate toward games in the middle, the full micro meso macro cluster, and toward pure micro and pure macro, but I don't really enjoy micro macro games. Speedrunning doesn't scratch the right itch for me. And when I looked at
I don't think speedrunning is heavy on macro. Like speedrunning as a whole maybe, but like if you speedrunning as a whole maybe because like people in the community are doing macro things, but if you just want to be a speedrunner, like most of the time that you're doing the speedrun, you're just doing micro. Like you have to like do some macro to like get into the game and understand it well enough to do that micro, I guess. The learning process is different from like the final game. Shows Minecraft speedrunning. Oh, okay. Yeah, and a super RNG heavy speedrun is not what I think of as speedrunning, but I guess it's what Zoomers think of as speedrunning. So yeah, because of Minecraft. That's something that I should keep in mind as an old head trying to talk about young head stuff. Super Mario Maker being the top leftmost game. Yeah, it definitely has more mezzo. Although I don't think the space, the positioning within each section is supposed to be relevant. But yeah. What do I gravitate to? I guess the middle. I just like everything. I like when there's a lot going on in general. But I also gravitate toward things that are like really, really simple, focusing on doing one thing better than anything else, like Angel Game. But there's also something weird about Angel Game where it's so minimal in one way that it actually has more to. Maybe that's not exactly true. There's just for some reason there is a lot more depth to Angel Game than you would expect in terms of the analytical side. There's more of an analytical side, thinking about accounting for the RNG and modeling the bullet, the difference between a bullet at the very top of the screen versus the middle, the routing, things like that. There's maybe but yeah, I do always really like it when a game goes super deep on just one type of gameplay by focusing in on it in a way that more generalist games cannot. But I also often really love super generalist games. How many hours in Dota 2 do I have? About 1,500.
Why? It mapped exactly.
But that was all between like 2013 and 2017. I haven't played. I played a little bit with friends who were trying to get into it in like 2020, and it seemed like it had gotten a lot worse since then. So, but then again, I just didn't know what was going on because a lot had changed. Actually, it was probably later than 2020. It was around the time that they like changed the map, like made the map bigger, which seems like an incredibly questionable decision to me. But yeah, I don't know what's going on with that game anymore. I feel like it peaked in like 2016, 2017, but maybe it peaked a little earlier and I just got deep enough to fully appreciate it in 2016, 2017.
Exactly. In Apex, I'd argue I aim pretty well and have respectable movement. I'd say I also have a solid understanding of rotations and ring positioning, but I tend to tunnel vision in close quarter fights, specifically when we're in the same building. So I tend to miss mezzo reads when the pressure is high. And this exactly explains the gap in my game. Because here's the real insight. Every player has a natural lean. Some people are micro players. They grind mechanics obsessively, and they want
that Apex example really highlights why I think Apex is great. There's just so much going on. Like there is a lot of modeling and planning and like understanding the game at a deep level in Apex, but there's also a lot of micro, and then there's also a lot of meso. It's really everything, and you can get tunnel visioned like he's saying, and prioritize one over the other in the wrong way. And people, I guess this is part of why people think Apex is a much stupider game than it actually is, because they play it in a stupid way by like tunnel visioning on micro and just not really getting to the point where they understand the map well enough to like position intelligently and things like that as well. But yeah, I think if you play the game well, you get to a point where the micro is much more automatic. You don't have to focus on it so much, and you can think more about strategy and reads. And yeah, it's just a really good game.
in my game.
At least,
Because
again, it was a really good game when I played it in like 2018, 2019, 2020, something like that. I get the sense that it has also gone downhill.
here's the real insight. Every player has a natural lean. Some people are micro players. They grind mechanics obsessively, and they want the skill gap to feel fair. Some people are meso players. They love reading people, and they thrive in the chaos of PvP randomness. Like we even see a common cluster of people who play Among Us, GTA RP, luck-based games like gambling, along with many other party games. And then we also see that some players are macro.
Okay, going back to what I was saying about what the difference between his meso and my social is the fact that it has to do with this randomness and chaotic stuff. That is an interesting way of putting it, or what he just said is interesting related to that, because you can imagine why a certain player, a player would like more unpredictability in general, whether that is from RNG or it's from um, other players having unpredictable behavior or whatever. But yeah, I think what I said about the early stages of a game being more mezzo in that regard, and then that kind of fades away unless there's actually other players. Like the only game that has lasting mezzo in the way that I think about it, like, is a game that has other players, where you have to think about what other players are thinking. But I can see where he's coming from in terms of like, it feels unpredictable in that same way. You're dealing with uncertainty. You're managing things that are not fully understood yet. You're making the best possible judgment call, trying to come up with the best possible idea of how something works before you fully understand it, things like that. And I am really drawn to that in games. This is like the opposite of Mark MSX taste, to go back to that a little bit. If you really value the blind playthrough, you're probably more of this kind of player. Don't love that XQC is our representative here, but I am in that category.
You even see a common cluster of people who play Among Us, GTA RP, luck-based games like gambling, along with many other party games. And then we also see that some players are macro players. They love efficiency, they draw routes on maps, they think about the game between games more than during it. And most of us are a mix, but not an equal mix. The games that frustrate you the most, they're probably demanding something your brain doesn't naturally give. The games you keep coming back to, they're probably rewarding the part of you that already runs at full power. Genre labels never told you any of this. Action RPG.
Here's something that's part of my initial reaction when he says something like that, or when he says like, it's natural that you would enjoy the games that you are better at and get frustrated and not so much enjoy the ones that they're not good at. Part of my initial reaction to that is like, well, shouldn't you like enjoy the ones you're not good at more, actually? Because at least if you have a good mindset about it, because if you have a good mindset, then you can think of that as more that you have to gain from those games, like more to learn, more to potentially get better at. And it's probably like lower hanging fruit, right? You don't have to get into super advanced stuff to be improving at the game, But I think there is something something important to understand about games that he's not covering here at all, and shouldn't cover here because it's a completely different topic. But like, something that's important to understand is that games can do a lot more interesting things when you're good at them. So if you're bad at mezzo stuff, you just never get to the deepest, most interesting reads and the deepest, most interesting mezzo gameplay. Whereas if you're good at macro, you can appreciate the most difficult, like puzzle games or whatever, that are doing much more complex and elaborate things. There's just more sophisticated things can happen and be appreciated by you in the game when you are better at the thing, right? So I do think it is natural for that reason, to be drawn to the games that you like the most, and to mostly play the games that you're good at. And I do think this is true for me as well. Like the fact that I haven't gotten super deep into fighting games is definitely related to the fact that I'm not as naturally good at mezzo, but I would like to get better at it. So I'm gonna try to get into it. What's the TLDR? I don't know. Open the transcript for the stream and paste it into ChatGPT and ask. I don't know. I can't summarize this, but it's an interesting video. I guess I'll give the TLDR or summarize a little bit at the end. We're almost there.
It doesn't tell you whether you'll be grinding execution, reading opponents, or solving systems. It just tells you
Or none of the above, because action RPGs are usually so stupid.
there's a sword and a level bar. And maybe more importantly, you can stop blaming yourself when a game doesn't click. Cause maybe the games are testing things you haven't built yet. In my case, it's the underdevelopment of meso. And that's the 3 dimensions of games: micro, meso, macro. Every game lives somewhere inside them. And now that you know where to look, you'll never see a game the same way again.
Okay. So yeah, overall, I think this is a really good video. Definitely got my eye on this guy from this alone. He's just Virtua Fighter, although haven't tried yourself. Yeah, I'm also interested in Virtua Fighter, even though I haven't tried it myself yet. I don't know who Mark STG is. Is it the same guy? But when he's playing shooting games? Yeah. Like I said, it doesn't well, maybe I should finish this out. So this is the way that I think about these things if you weren't here earlier. Micro is what I call sensory motor, or what I think about as sensory motor. I haven't actually like made a video about this or anything, and I probably should at some point, but I feel like it's not fully worked out yet. I feel like there's more thinking that needs to be done for this to be really good. But maybe it's just always going to feel that way because it's such a trying to categorize a big complicated space like everything that video games can do is it's always just going to be messy. Anyway, yeah, what he calls micro, like the actiony kind of stuff, I think of as sensory motor. What he calls macro, I think of as analytical, which is what a lot of people call thinky games. And then meso is kind of his border between macro and meso is different from my border between analytical and social. But yeah, like reading your opponent, coordinating with other people, things like that, I put under social. But then there's a 4th category that I think is really important to include, which is although wait, I think better than psychological might be something like regulatory. I'm not sure exactly. This is part of what I haven't really worked out entirely yet. But like, I'm thinking about stuff like your ability to focus or be like vigilant. Thinking about like something like imperviousness, as in your ability to maintain composure. Maybe just composure is a better word. Ability to maintain composure under pressure, to not choke, to not tilt, you know. Yeah, stuff like that. I don't know. I think that's clearly a different category than any of this stuff, and clearly very important. Yeah, there's also just like your ability to, I guess, like patience. There's something like self-modifiability. You know, like your ability to like not just notice that's like after you've noticed that something's wrong in the way that you're playing, your ability to actually manage to implement that in yourself. That's kind of a planning and strategic thing in a weird meta way, but it's also kind of like I'm sure there are also like regulatory / psychological skills around that. So yeah, that's my 4 categories, but I think he did a pretty good job of like pinning down the 3 more obvious ones, I guess. We should let's watch this other one. Let's at least try to watch this other one. I hope it's not just horrible after that one was good. It only has 50k views, so maybe it's just horrible. Then again, none of my videos have 50k views, and I think they're pretty good. We'll give it a try.
There's a debate in gaming that never actually ends. Not because nobody
There's a lot of those, but okay.
has an answer, but because everyone's arguing using a different scoreboard, and they don't even know it. You've probably had this argument yourself or watched it happen in a comment section. Which game requires the most mechanical skill? Some say Rocket League, others say Geometry Dash, and someone else might say StarCraft. And honestly, they are all right. But that's not the problem. The problem is, nobody can actually compare them. One is controlling a car in 3-dimensional space, one is a 2D platformer, and one is a top-down strategy game. You can't
I hope we're gonna get into how they're actually hard, physically or mentally, rather than what they actually just look like.
really put those on the same ruler, so maybe the question we've been asking is the wrong one. Instead of which game is the most mechanical, what actually makes a game mechanical in the first place? What are the fundamental ingredients that every one of these games are built out of? The fundamental components of mechanics fall under something we can call micro, the execution layer of a game, and it's made of 3 senses: vision, hearing, and touch. Each
What? That was such a curveball. That was such a curveball. Its micro is made out of vision, hearing, and touch. Okay, I guess I see what he's going. You're in. I mean, these are inputs, and then this as like an output. Oh, is he saying that haptics? Okay, so like I said, this is related to my sensory motor thing. And in that, I consider I'm kind of lumping together things that involve your output to the game, like what you're inputting to the game, together with what the game is outputting to you and how you perceive that. Okay. And so at first I thought he was saying like, okay, these are the things that the game is outputting to you, and the way that you process that is also going to be under micro, having to process that information properly and maybe and understand it. And then touch is like you touching your keyboard to input back to the game. But now it seems like these are all just, if you think of haptics as touch, then that's also information you're getting from the game. But how is that relevant to micro? I've never played a game where I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what's going on.
one is big enough to be its own breakdown, but today we're isolating just one of them: touch. So, what makes a game physically mechanical to play? There are 3 fundamental components under touch. The first is the control system. Not all input devices are built the same. Mouse and keyboard, controller, steering wheel, tablet, and a touchscreen are all completely different input devices. So how do we standardize something this messy? Every control system breaks down into 2 types: binary and analog. Binary has 2 inputs: tap and hold.
I'm afraid he's getting too much into details that aren't actually the point here. Like if I were, I haven't thought about this as much, but if I were to break down mechanical skills, so let's just talk about micro skill / difficulty. Hope you like that I'm writing with my hand instead of using text boxes. Okay, so micro skill / difficulty would be like different types of it, right? I'm not immediately going to like difficulty that comes from the control system versus some other thing and like whatever. I'm just gonna categorize them at a high level as like different types of challenge. So like a reaction time, a pure reaction time. Action time. And then there's like a precision check. Spelling. And then this within precision, first of all, there's a bunch more stuff, but then within precision, that would break down into like the types of things that he's probably getting into here. Like, you know, if you have an analog stick, you can do different types of precision than you can do with a binary input. You can have a precise tilt of the control stick, or like swoop it around in an arc in a certain way. You know, you can have the skate for the PS3 skate controls or whatever. And you know, you can kind of do that with like a fight stick or whatever, but what do you call that, joystick? But it can't be as granular. It can't quite test the same exact motion. It can't quite demand the same things from you. But that's going to be like within precision. You know, like a stick tilt. Just like a timed button press. This is horrible, but like timed press of a digital button would be like the obvious thing. But then there's that, and then there's, I guess I would probably categorize like button mash, like super fast button mashing, as a different thing other than precision. But maybe he's gonna talk about that in this as well. But like, you know, speed of input, and like, you know, that would include like APM and stuff. Consistency also, that's an interesting point. But I think that kind of applies to everything. You know? You can be consistent or inconsistent at reaction time, or at precision, or at speed, or whatever. Doing too much, yeah, I think so. We'll see. We'll give it a little more time. Give him a little more time.
Tap causes a direct, instant outcome, like jumping in Flappy Birds or flashing in League. Hold causes a continuous outcome, like flying in Jetpack Joyride or holding space to charge a jump in Jump King. Analog is more layered. It has an input type and a mapping, and the mapping is where things get interesting. The input types are positional, which is moved across one or more axes. A Wii remote can move across 3 axes. A mouse can move across 2.
Yeah, I was thinking about like VR as well, which is kind of related to what he was saying about the Wii remote. Like in VR, you have like so many different axes of input that matter. You know, the position, you know, the position of your controller in 3D space is 3 axes, right? Your X, Y, and Z position in 3D space. And then the tilt direction, you know, if you're thinking about playing Beat Saber, that's just a much more complex, you know, the gameplay kind of collapses it down to something much simpler. But in theory, like VR has a lot of complexity to the input that can test a lot more things within like the precision category.
And a volume slider across 1. Rotational inputs. These can be rotated across pitch, yaw, or roll. For example, like a VR controller with 3 dimensions, a trackball in 2 dimensions, and a steering wheel in 1. And pressure input. These are compressed by force. Think a pen tablet or a gas pedal. Now for mapping, there's actually 3 types of them. Relative mapping is that the output continues from wherever it left off. For example, lifting your mouse and then setting it down. The cursor keeps going from where it left off. Absolute mapping is when the output is locked to a fixed position, like a tablet stylus or a steering wheel with a fixed tire angle. And lastly, continuous mapping. The output runs on its own, usually by velocity. An example
What? The output runs on its own, generally by velocity? What?
continuous mapping. The output runs on its own, usually by velocity. An example is an analog stick that keeps the cursor moving as long as it's tilted. Now, why does this matter?
What's the relevant distinction between that and just a button press though? But okay. Yeah, why does this matter? Thank you. This is the question that I was wondering, because it feels like he's doing too much and not aiming at something really explanatory and helpful. And yeah, we'll see.
Because mapping tells you what's actually optimal for a given task. In a 2D precision game, a 2-axis absolute position device, like a drawing tablet, is the theoretical optimum. And that's because, unfortunately, the mouse has something called rotational drift, and there's a simple experiment you can do to see this effect. If you go on a drawing app and you swipe your mouse left and right while keeping your eyes completely closed, you'll realize that your cursor has drifted even though in real life your hands are in the same position. And you can see the comparison between the mouse and the tablet.
Is this actually true? Wait, why is it drifting? Why would that be true? why would that be true? Like, it does seem to be going downward. Okay, let's try this again. Why is it, what's going on here? Grok, is this true? I guess it's okay. He called it rotational drift, right? So it's like because I'm rotating. If I were to keep it completely flat, I can't really. It's hard to do that, but it's at least different. Something different is happening. But I can't actually test this. Your mouse doesn't account for rotation. Yeah. I guess I'm questioning how relevant this is to actual gameplay though. Because when I'm doing this test, right? When I'm doing this test, I'm not actually trying to like go perfectly horizontally. I'm just swinging my arm back and forth, right? If I were playing an FPS and I had to move the mouse perfectly horizontally, I would not do this same motion. It's relevant if you have your eyes closed, yeah. But yeah, if I had to move perfectly horizontally in a game, I would not do the same motion. I would move my whole arm rather than like keeping my elbow locked on the armrest. And I would think about I wouldn't think about it, but like I would go more horizontally. So yeah, I'm questioning how relevant this actually is, but that's interesting at least. Eyes closed Osu, definitely a pin only category. Yeah. Yeah, but I agree. No, I agree with you. I agree that you have more precision with a tablet, of course.
In a 3D first-person precision game, the optimum would technically be a 2-axis absolute position with one absolute rotational axis in yaw. Obviously, this device doesn't exist. So you're left choosing between a 2-axis relative position device and a 2-axis continuous position device.
I'm trying to imagine this. Is he saying that you can turn? You're turning with one input, and then you're aiming as in a normal FPS with the mouse, but then like the aim is relative to the screen space. It's not like where you aim is always going to be the center of the screen. It's like you're turning you're turning physically, and then you're aiming within the screen space, but the aim is bound by the screen space. Is that actually better? I'm not instantly convinced by that, but it could be. But I guess you could probably test this with like VR or something. Maybe there's some good way to test it.
So you're left choosing between a 2-axis relative position device and a 2-axis continuous position device. And these two tools optimize for opposite situations. If you're trying to track a target that orbits you endlessly, continuous position wins. If you're trying to flick it instantly onto a target that just appeared, relative position wins. And once you have this vocabulary, you can actually quantify a piece of hardware. But there's actually another component in micro, and it's much more subtle. And it's called layout. It's basically how the inputs are physically arranged on the device. For example, you can spread WASD apart on the keyboard and the game gets technically mechanically harder. In video games, this rarely matters since people rebind keys freely, but in real life games, it's much more apparent. Bop It is a great
Is that actually? I guess. Okay.
but in
I guess the Jenga tower is the equivalent of the controller here because it's something that you're touching. Fair enough, I guess. And okay. I guess I accept this. Sorry, Jenga. Jenga for the non-southerners in the audience.
life games, it's much more apparent. Bop It is a great example of a game that does this. All the inputs are spread apart to add complexity, but if the buttons were all next to each other, the game would technically become much easier.
I don't like the word complexity for that, but yeah, this is definitely, is this something that I was capturing in what I was saying? Like how would I describe this challenge of like moving? I don't know. I mean, obviously there's still a heavy speed layer to it, but yeah, the fact that it's doing all of these different things is like a dexterity, a different kind of dexterity challenge, I guess. It's, I don't know, it might just be like precision. It's just you're doing a certain motion. You're doing a certain motion. It's just a weird one. So yeah, I think we might still just be under what I would call precision. The problem with calling it dexterity is like all of this is dexterity, I think. Maybe not reaction time. I don't know. But a lot of things are dexterity. I think that's a little too broad.
But here's the catch. Measuring the hardware only tells you what's possible. It doesn't tell you what the game actually demanded of you. So there's actually one more component in Micro. Game design.
Bro, this should be the whole thing. Like, it should be framed around what the game actually does, not framed around like the controllers first. But it is important to understand that a lot more is possible with more complex controllers, I guess. More complex inputs being read.
This is the layer on top of the hardware that can actively raise or lower physical mechanical complexity, and it splits into 3 categories. The first one is a constraint. What does the game force you to do? The first constraint is timing. This is the window in which you have to register an input, like tapping at the exact frame in Geometry Dash, or holding and releasing precisely in Jump King. The second constraint is accuracy. For binary inputs, this is testing.
Okay, so timing and accuracy, very closely related to, well, I guess I was thinking reaction time is timing, but that's not timing at all. Timing is precision, is what I'm thinking of as precision. So like a timed button press, but then accuracy would be some of these other categories, like a precise stick tilt, a precise flick of the mouse for aim in an FPS. That would be other types of precision. And maybe it is worth separating timing out from like the specific movement that you have to do being hard. I don't know.
Which key has to be pressed. This is kind of like QuickTime events. But for analog accuracy, this tests how exact the position has to be, like a giant forgiving target versus a tiny pixelated target. And the last constraint is order. The inputs have to land in the correct sequence. The best example is typing. The order of the letters that you press matters. Another example are
Sure about that, because I mean, I'm sure that the order matters, but what actually makes this difficult is not the fact that the order matters. It's the fact that you have to go really fast while still doing those other things. It's the fact that you have to be precise. You have to have the good timing and the good accuracy while going really fast. But yeah.
is typing. The order of the letters that you press matters. Another example are fighting game combos. If you get the order wrong, the action doesn't register. Next, we look into the second category, opportunity. This is what happens in the downtime of a game. And there's 3 kinds of opportunistic action. The first one is informative action. This is an action that gains you information. For example, like checking the scoreboard or checking the map. Five Nights at Freddy's is built almost entirely around this. The game never forces you to check the cameras, but on the hardest difficulty, not checking becomes the losing move. Next is productive action.
Did I zone out for a second and miss something? Because I do not understand how this stuff is related to micro. Like, this whole video is framed around micro difficulty, right? I just find this very confused. I find the framing very confused, but we'll keep going.
These are actions that move you towards a better state. Think organizing your inventory, crafting items, creating troops, or repositioning. You can think of productive action as preparing you to the actual constraint. But there's also a third type of action that I want to talk about, and this is called redundant action. This is action that serves no function in the actual game state. For example, someone that's flicking onto their teammate's head in spawn, or someone spam clicking to warm up. Another great example is early game StarCraft fidgeting. It serves a real purpose in terms of rhythm or warm-up, but it does not change the state of the game, so this does not count towards mechanical complexity. And the third component of game design is total unique action.
Okay, so what he's saying that what he's trying to do, I think he stated this early and I kind of got lost and forgot, but he was saying what he's talking about, what contributes to mechanical complexity. So I guess he's just saying that the actions, the things that you have to do determine what you have to do. I don't know. I would just frame this around what you actually have to do and take it as a given that you have to do a lot of it, or have that as a different, the amount that you have to do each of the things is something that can change, but like, you don't have to talk about why you have to do the things because they're productive actions or informative actions. Like, these are just things that help you win the game, and so you have to do them, and that should be this whole thing should be taken as a given, you know? It's like if you were to distinguish in Spy Party between an informative action and a productive action, it's like when people think that Spy Party isn't strategic because you're not doing a bunch of inputs. When in reality, you do very few inputs in Spy Party, but it's like the strategy, you see things in the game and then the strategy is based on what you see and it determines where you're going to look next. The strategy determines what you're going to pay attention to. It's not something that's instantly cashed out in terms of like inputs to the game. You don't strategize and then express that strategy through your inputs. You express your strategy in Spy Party mostly through where you're looking and what you're paying attention to. And that's fine. Like that's a totally distinct layer, and it's something that I find really interesting about the game, but it's totally distinct from this stuff, which is what the video I feel like is actually supposed to be about. Yeah, this is just, I mean, we'll give him the rest of the video to change my mind about this, but I feel like this is why, you know, frameworks like this, making a framework that's like really accurate, and you see this a lot with the arcade crowd. They're all about their frameworks for what game design should be or whatever. And it's like, that's like the hardest thing to do as a critic or as a theory of games person or whatever. You know, when you're thinking about games, the hardest thing to do is to make a really rigorous, complete, helpful framework like this. The easiest, when you're newer to game criticism and you maybe haven't played all the different types of games out there and don't understand all the different types of games very well, you should probably not be doing that much of this stuff and more be doing like, you know, talking about a specific game and trying to understand what makes that game good or what's going on in that specific game. Because you have to play a lot of games and generalize a lot and draw a lot of parallels and make a lot of connections in order to then make a generalized framework about games, you know? Like Matthew Matosis, I love his videos. For example, just take his last two videos. I loved his Ghouls and Ghosts video because he's mostly talking about a specific game and he's making some interesting generalizations about what he sees, but he's not framing it around this general thing about game design, right? Whereas his aesthetic deception video, I think, has a lot more missteps in it. even though I kind of agree with what he's trying to say, I think the way that he tries to make it into such a general framework overlooks a lot about types of games that he hasn't played, maybe, or hasn't played as much of, or doesn't understand as well. And it's like, and I'm not trying to say that I'm better. Like, I hesitate to do this kind of stuff, like what I was doing, what I had written here earlier. Can I go back to it? It's gonna take forever. uh, anyway, um, I hesitate to like talk too much and focus too much about these like genre hierarchies and like frameworks for what games are as a whole, because games are super complicated and messy and can do a million different things. And I don't know if anyone really understands everything well enough to like make these kind of general frameworks very well. But I feel like I'm getting to the point. I'm at least getting to the point where I can do it well enough that it's maybe worth trying. But yeah. Anyway, that's a rant about game criticism in general. But yeah, we'll keep going. We'll give him a chance to redeem or partially redeem. I did not react to aesthetic deception on stream. If you would like to hear my thoughts on aesthetic deception, you are probably in luck, and you will probably hear those pretty soon.
How many genuinely different actions exist? Type Racer sits at one extreme. Every single input does something unique. Osu, on the other hand, sits at the other. Z and X both just click the circle, so it counts as one unique action. Now here's the interesting part. All three of these, constraint, opportunity, and total unique action, get multiplied by pressure.
We got a multiplier coming in. Okay, but like total unique action. Total unique action. I mean, how do you talk about like analog when it gets real analog, How do you distinguish like swinging the Wiimote when it's tilted exactly this way and swinging it in this arc from like swinging it in a slightly different arc, or like in getting over it? Like every there are infinite, slightly different ways to move the mouse that will do different things. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Speed, how fast the inputs must be executed, like jitter clicking or world record typing speeds. Sustain, which is how long the inputs must be sustained, a 45-minute match versus a 30-second typing prompt. And simultaneous, how many constraints.
Okay, sustain is interesting related to what I was saying, because I was actually thinking of, I talked about endurance as part of like a regulatory or psychological kind of difficulty. Your ability to endure, to just keep going, to keep playing and stay focused and all of this stuff, for a really long period of time. That's kind of a psychological thing in my mind almost. But there is also physical endurance in the kind of micro category. That's a type of difficulty, I guess, that I hadn't really thought about. But yeah, speed, I feel like I guess you could just call it speed, but it feels pretty different when it's like your ability to mash one button as fast as possible versus like your ability to have 500 APM in StarCraft. That feels like two completely different things, but maybe that's just different categories overlapping. Maybe it's just the accuracy and precision and speed categories all overlapping, and that's what makes it feel super different. But yeah, I do think the speed stuff can get surprisingly interesting. I've talked about this before, but maybe I can just find it. Yeah. So here's a video that I made showing how I'll just mute it, but showing how I do this trick in Majora's Mask speedrunning, where I hold the controller in a really weird way, which is necessary to make this happen, which is also interesting. What do I actually do it? And then I'm showing like how to hold it against my body to like, make it as easy and consistent as possible. But what I'm Let me show what I'm actually trying to do. I'm talking. Do I actually do it, dog? So this is what I'm actually trying to do. I'm trying to mash the control stick from neutral to down over and over again. Ideally up to 10 times per second. I'm trying to do that. And you can't for reasons in the game, you can't go left and right like at all. If you're moving the stick left and right like at all, it's bad. So I'm like gripping the stick between two fingers so that it's like stabilized horizontally, and then I'm like trying to mash it downwards while I'm like holding it in this super weird way and all this stuff. So I'm like kind of demonstrating that. But what was I trying to say about this? Like it gets super interesting for a lot of reasons. First of all, like this is an example of the fact that I had to figure out how to do all this and how to hold the controller and all of this stuff. Like this is the physical layer of a game, and like the speed and the sustain and all of this kind of stuff interacting with a strategic layer. There's a strategic layer here in how I'm actually I'm coming up with plans and ideas and things to experiment with, and then I'm trying them out, and I'm there is strategy in how I'm holding the controller, and it's like determined by like when certain buttons have to be pressed right before and after this mashing and stuff like that. It's like all of this stuff is determined in a complex way by like the physical reality of having hands that have to interact with this particular controller in this particular way. So I think this kind of difficulty is like super underrated in terms of how interesting it can actually be. We really don't see games play with that very often, but this is an example. You can watch the whole video if you want to understand the details, but that's kind of an example of that. I feel like there was more that I was going to say there, but I got lost in my ranting about that trick, which I think is really cool.
And opportunities you're juggling at once. Like, are you moving, aiming, and shooting at the same time? Or are you driving, flipping, and rotating at the same time? Now that we've explained all three components in the same time.
I'm not really sure how I would categorize this kind of like how I would break that down, the difficulty of this kind of moving, aiming, and shooting at the same time. Well, shooting is easy, right? You're just holding a button mostly. But moving and aiming at the same time, it's like you build some kind of intuition of how the two things relate to each other. You know, how to move your mouse to compensate for the movement and continue aiming in the same spot. And then similarly, like when you have like a spray pattern in an FPS, and then you have to like aim, you have to like track your opponent while also accounting for the spray pattern, offsetting the spray pattern. That's like two overlapping moves that you're trying to do. You're trying to do the sum of those two different movement patterns over time. And I don't know exactly what's going on in your brain when you're doing that, but surely there is a skill involved with that, and it's similar to the movement plus aiming skill.
And shooting at the same time? Or are you driving, flipping, and rotating at the same time? Now that we've explained all three components in physical mechanics, we can finally take the ruler we just built and actually run it.
Sorry, but what I was trying to say, what I should have said about that also is that related to what he's actually saying is that he's calling that simultaneous, and I don't think I would categorize it that way, because it feels like you're doing the sum of two things, right? It doesn't feel like you're doing the movement and the aiming at the same time. It feels more like your brain figures out how to account for both of those things at once. And that's like via a processing layer that I would consider a different type of difficulty to get good at that.
Over the games people fight about, and we're going to take into account the highest level of each game. Geometry Dash has very high timing, none in accuracy, none in order, very low total unique action, none in informative action, none in productive action.
This is just so complicated, man. Like his previous video was like really nice and simple, big picture, and this is like, what is even going on here? Geometry Dash, very high in timing, no accuracy, no order. But there is order. You have to press the buttons in an order. I don't know what's going on. High speed. Total unique actions, very low. Yeah, okay.
medium sustain, and very low simultaneous. Almost the entire mechanical load sits on one design, frame perfect timing. But I'm also gonna guess from a hunch that Geometry Dash will also test visual mechanics far more than any other game.
I'm so curious what he's actually thinking of when he says vision and hearing as part of micro. I guess it is what I think of, just the processing layer. I just wouldn't have thought that he would put that under his micro. I would have thought that would demand a completely different category in his mind. But I guess that's my bad meso showing. I failed to read his mind about this. It's not different buttons in an order, it's just timing the same button. Yeah, fair enough. But okay, yeah, no, that's true. That's true. That's totally true.
CS2 has medium timing, such as when you counter-strafe or b-hop, very high accuracy, because you have to aim, very low order, medium total unique action, very low informative action, medium productive action, high speed, high sustain.
This informative and productive action thing just feels so unrelated to everything else. It's crazy. High speed? Speed of inputs? I guess flicking, yes. I guess flicking is high speed. Okay. High sustain? Collapse order and total unique actions into one. Yeah, probably. If I'm remembering what he said about those things correctly, but honestly, I, I'm not lost. Like I understand his framework. I just don't like it very much, and think it's kind of a mess, and have lost some of the details in the mess. StarCraft better be the hardest game. Good one, Sam. Is StarCraft the hardest game? I feel like maybe this is just my lack of deep experience with StarCraft. I played like maybe 100 hours of it back in the day. But I feel like it's much less strategic than people think. Like I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I probably shouldn't make that claim. But I think there are other games that are more that have a lot deeper, maybe deeper is the wrong word, but have a lot more going on strategy wise.
And medium simultaneous action. Rocket League is also a very interesting game to look at, so I asked Coach Luke on his
Not that StarCraft is like I'm sure it's like close to the top, right? Like I'm not completely disagreeing with the claim.
thoughts as a KBM player.
It's like I say, for a casual person, the consistency, the total unique action, and the speed is all very high. But for a pro player, timing and simultaneity are definitely the highest. But you could still argue that the other three are still pretty high, depending on what game you're comparing it to. Honestly, for me, it's definitely a fight between simultaneous and timing. Especially for at least KBM. Normally when turning, or for example when flying, you can, like if you look at the left, just to fly as precisely as possible, I'm tapping A and S. And depending on how precise I want to be, I might tap it even faster or even slower.
But I also asked Coach Stolen and
So that felt like simultaneous inputs, whereas his example of like aiming and moving at the same time doesn't exactly feel like the same type of thing. Yeah, I think StarCraft on a micro level is crazy hard. Yeah. Oh wait. Oh, you're saying the hardest game has the answer to this question. Sorry. I was thinking about the hardest game overall, because I had been kind of thinking about the other categories as well. Yeah, mechanically difficult. Mechanical difficulty. That might be true.
pro player Sosa as a controller player.
I do think it's worth noting, like, the timing incorporated into the game also is what makes the mechanics really unique, because you could perform the same action that you do, like, for example, like single jump and then try to aerial and go for the ball. However, if you take too long to do so, you're gonna lose your flip. So, like, timing matters a lot, and I think that's, like, really big in Rocket League.
So then I asked about one of Rocket League's most difficult mechanic, the Psycho.
A Psycho, I don't think any of us could do it on command, because it really is that hard.
It's like you gotta be really precise with your touch, because like most of the times, if you just don't do it right, the ball will go either really slow, or you can just like even hit it towards your net, you know.
The timing this is taking is crazy, because I need the proper momentum going to this ball. I have to hit it on the exact, like, this exact part of the wall for me to actually follow and get a good hit at the net. Then I have to read this bounce. I have to boost on the way there, feather my boost. I have to angle my car to actually meet the ball to the point where I'm going from the bottom right corner all the way to their net, full field, and I meet it, and then I go straight.
Why does this feel so much like Trackmania? I understand that they both have cars, but like, it's still surprising how much this sounds like Trackmania.
So it's really, really difficult to execute. It's not something that you see often.
It has very high timing, medium accuracy, low order, medium total unique action, medium informative action, low productive action, medium speed, medium sustain, and very high simultaneous action. StarCraft 2 is a very unique case as well. So I asked StarCraft 2 coach
Gade.
Lorembo on his thoughts.
When I say people think that StarCraft is very hard, but often enough they kind of miss it, is because, with the exception of maybe, let's say, accuracy, which if we count the button can kind of be on like medium high or high, you can say that in the constraint element, overall the game is quite easy.
Right.
Accuracy, medium.
I couldn't help but notice the Coinbase ad in this stream or whatever it is. Why are StarCraft players so into gambling? Like, StarCraft players are like I've seen examples of like people saying like invest in this ticker, you know, buy this specific stock in their like StarCraft username or something like that. I feel like that's something that I just only see in the StarCraft community. It's so weird.
High, or they're also like not even medium on it, like low or medium at the very most. And so this kind of shows what I was saying at the start, that people often think of StarCraft like, as a game that's very hard on the left, but it's actually really hard on the right. Okay, so speed, just to be clear, includes the mouse, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, it's either high or very high. I think it's only high, because it's, when I think of very high, I'm thinking like something pure speed, like typing, whereas like there is no other metric. You are
What? Why wouldn't it be very high? There's not like a limit to how fast you can be in StarCraft that would be helpful, right? I don't quite get that. Yeah, they're deciding completely based on vibes, but like I can't imagine why it wouldn't be very high just based on some of the other things that we've seen.
test on how quickly you are, right? So that's like the pinnacle of the speed in my head.
It has very low timing, high accuracy, medium order, high total unique action, very high informative action, and very high productive action. It also
Okay, I'm just gonna not think about these ones too much because it's just very strange.
has high speed and very high sustain.
Well, I think the problem is like the timing versus the speed thing gets kind of weird. Like in the game, often it's like you could do things in different orders or whatever. But the fact that you're trying to do it so fast then does make it so that you have to do things in the right order, which also seems like it would be order. Like this is why this is just a big mess, man. But timing, yeah, I think it's not like specific frame windows are relevant that often, which is what that's what he's trying to say, is that specific frame windows are not relevant that often. But I would definitely crank this to very high. Sustain very high for sure.
and high simultaneous.
I feel like I would crank this to very high. Simultaneous. I mean, he's talking about simultaneous in a really weird way that I don't really agree with, but yeah.
The really cool part about this is that you can directly see, based off of what a game tests, what are the trade-offs that tend to occur. Like for example, in Osu, if the circles were the size of those small balls in aim trainers, tapping speed would inevitably fall down. Or if Geometry Dash had an extra unique action, like ducking, this could also affect the speed as well. The cool thing is that we see these trade-offs in real-life sports as well. The simplest example is long-distance running versus sprinting. Both are trying to get to the finish line as fast as possible, but the long-distance runner is going to be running at less speed compared to the short-distance runner. And I suspect you can even interpolate these trade-offs in game design. But this is where the framework stops being a scoring tool and starts being a design tool as well. Because every one of these components
Ain't no one using this as a design tool. I'm sorry, bro. I'm sorry, but how do you look at this and go to a video game and make a video game? What? That's not. I mean, I'm not a game designer, so maybe someone in the chat can correct me on that, but it's very hard to imagine. It's very hard to imagine starting from this and and going to a game design. But I don't know, maybe when you're working on a game, like you can use parts of this to think about how to tune things or something and how that affects what the game feels like, whatever. Sorry, shouldn't have laughed that hard at it. Maybe there's something to it. Well, there's something else I was going to say.
Scoring tool and starts being a design tool as well. Because every one of these components.
Oh yeah. StarCraft 1 has so many weird animation quirks where timing matters a lot. Yeah, okay. I'm not aware of any of that stuff, so that could be very true. Check out the crazy ultimate chicken horse tourney happening right now after my stream. Might do that. Might raid them. Twitch.tv. Today I want to make a high, very low, low, medium, high game. Yeah. That sounds fire, man. Sounds great.
Can be dialed up or down independently, and League of Legends might be the clearest example of a game that deliberately spreads these demands. If you
it is interesting to think about, like a game that maxes out all of them. I guess it's like gonna just then be limited to, you know, some of them are inevitably going to be rewarded by the game more than others, and so it's like it effectively would be like you could effectively rate them as like low, medium, high, or whatever based on just like human limits. Because I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's too hard to explain. If League is the hardest game in his framework, that is so crazy. I mean, it's especially crazy because Dota is just directly harder. But
want a champion that tests timing, you have someone like Gangplank or Riven. If you want to test accuracy, Ezreal is built entirely around skill shots. If you want to test order, Hui's entire kit is basically that. Every single combination is a different ability. If you want to test informative action, Jungle as a role or champions like Twisted Fate or Shen is a perfect example. If you want to test productive action, you can play someone like Ivern to set up your camps, or someone like Yorick to split push with a Maiden. To test total unique actions, you can have something like support champions juggling multiple active items. And if you want to test speed, any AD carry can kind of fit into this, but also someone like Yasuo. And I think this can even span into why certain games feel like they're missing certain types of mechanical components. But that only covers one of the three senses: touch. Vision and hearing are still completely unmapped. I don't know what they will look like, but I can't wait to find out.
I did not like that video as much as the other one, I'm sorry. But I do think StarCraft is playing League with more than one unit at a time. I don't think that's quite true. I think the number of different things that you're doing at the same time all the time. I mean, my experience is Dota, so I'm not speaking about League. I'm speaking about Dota. I think, yeah, like the difficulty of Dota is like I constantly have to do the timing. I constantly have to do these timed inputs, and related to those timed inputs, like the last hitting, the laning stuff, I'm like doing spacing. I'm doing fighting game related spacing stuff, and like understanding the enemy team characters that are in my lane and what they're doing. Fighting game like reads and spacing and all of that kind of stuff, and based on that, and also based on the last hitting stuff, I'm like doing strategic stuff to like make the last hits as easy as possible. But like that's like one tiny part of what's going on in the game. Like I also have to like look at the other lanes. I have to be like checking the other lanes, like how he pulls up the map in Five Nights at Freddy's. You have to check the other lanes and make sure that you shouldn't be teleporting somewhere else right now for a team fight or to save your friend or whatever. You have to be like tracking a bunch of timings, both like the literal like timer on the screen for like when creep camps are going to respawn or when the next wave of creeps is coming that you might want to like body block. But also like timings for what point in the game we're at and when things are likely to happen based on your understanding of what's going on in the game in general. There's like so much more complexity to the game in a certain sense because it's a team game. And it's just like, yeah, it becomes more of an attention splitting game, at least in a different way. I do think StarCraft is an attention splitting game to some degree, but or yeah, it's just different. It feels really different in practice, I think, when you're really good at StarCraft versus really good at Dota. Yes, bless you, Misa. Dota 2 is less skill shotty and dodging based. I don't know. I haven't played enough League to tell you. Why he brought up random nervous button mashing in a lobby before a CS match as the type of input. Yeah. I mean, the entire thing about actions, opportunity, this whole part, this whole side of it is not necessary to talk about what he was trying to talk about, I feel like. I don't really know what he was thinking there. League leans way more into the fighting game stuff than Dota. I don't know. You might just think that because you're deeper into League, because I know that I was able to engage with that aspect much more when I got like really good at Dota. But there was a moment like 1,000 hours into me playing Dota where I realized how much more I could do with like the laning phase, like messing with my opponents and making it harder for them to do what they're trying to do and stuff. Yeah, that makes it sound like I was completely clueless for 1,000 hours, which I wasn't. But my skill at that specific aspect leveled up in a big way pretty late in my Dota career, if we can call it that. Okay, yeah, I mean it might be true. It might be true. I'm just speculating. League is 10,000 times harder in terms of micro. Now I don't believe that. I don't believe that because Dota has like Meepo. I mean, I guess maybe you don't really call that micro, but like Dota has characters that you have to play like StarCraft, where there's just so much. You're controlling so many different units at once, and there's so much to do that you're pressing like a billion buttons at once. Yeah, like 4 characters. Okay, but that's everyone else's point and click. Okay. Isn't that what most League characters are like though? What's the difference? I'm not sure I'm understanding the difference, but again, I haven't played that much League. But yeah, still gonna keep my eye on this channel. It's interesting, you know. It's interesting. Most stuff is skill shots you have to aim. There's tons of that in Dota. I mean, yeah. I don't know. It's not every ability, but you know, you have to be good at that with most characters, I feel like. Certainly, look, at the very least I'm objecting to the 10,000 times thing. You get a lot of value out of being good at Meepo and Broodmother and so on. So I think the fact that it's only 4 characters still matters a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if the percentage of abilities that are skill shots is lower. But again, 10,000 times. Come on, get out of here. Yeah, I'm raging right now. I am completely raging. That's what I'm doing. Okay. Gonna make a game about unproductive actions. That's actually you could say that a lot of games are like that. Curious which ones come to mind for y'all. First thing I thought is Cookie Clicker. But you could say that all games are about unproductive actions. But in the sense that he's talking about where it's not even productive within the game. I mean, like, character creation is not productive within the game. I don't know. Okay. I think this is an attempt at making a video game equivalent to music theory, not a guideline, but a sort of lexicon to help communicate ideas. At the risk of being mean, I think you may underestimate how much work goes into making such a thing. Yeah, that's basically what I was saying. I think it's I think it can be a very valuable thing, but it's extremely hard. You have to understand so many things so deeply, so many completely different types of games and things that games can do. I mean, we can't even if I did this really well based on let's not say me because I can't do this. If some perfect person who has played every type of game and completely understands games, completely understands all of the games that currently exist, even if they made their perfect, framework, game theory framework, that's a confusing term to use, game theory, but a theory of video game difficulty or whatever, it still wouldn't include games that haven't been invented yet, right? Like, you would have to invent every possible game. You'd have to foresee every possible game that will be invented in the future, including with technology that doesn't exist yet and all of this stuff. Like, it's impossible to do this perfectly, and there's a very high amount of skill involved in even doing it passably, I think. And I think his other video is he did a really admirable job and did it passably, even though I have I had some nitpicks with it, but and maybe bigger than nitpicks. I had some problems with it and I would have done it differently, but this one is, it's just not there yet. Okay. I think that's the stream. Oh yeah, I will repeat what I said at the beginning of the stream briefly. We're doing a game jam in the Discord. And by we, I mean the developers in the Discord. I'm not participating, but I will be trying to play all of the games that get submitted on stream in a few weeks after the jam is over. I didn't say this at the beginning of the stream. The game jam starts this coming Friday. And it'll be 2 weeks. It'll last 2 weeks. So if you are doing any other prominent game jams during this time that are only a few days long, you can still probably participate if you really want to, and not take the whole time, because honestly, it would not. If your experience with making games, it shouldn't take the whole 2 weeks to make just any game that fits this theme at all. But I think it's good to make it, to have a little bit more of a longer jam in case people want to spend time experimenting with ideas, in case people want to make a particular type of game that's a little bit more involved, whatever. Anyway, yeah, we're doing that. Join the Discord if you're interested in that. And yeah, I also, if you weren't here at the beginning of the stream, I also talked about I gave a brief channel update in terms of like the videos I'm working on and stuff. But you can go back and watch that if you want to. I'm not going to repeat that whole thing. Other than that, thanks for watching. Hope you all have a good week. Bye bye.